Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Community Leaders. Thank you for joining us. We have the one and the only John Williams. He's here. And it's interesting how John is like, so you're the newest member of our government faculty here at MCC. Mm-hmm. So we're proud to have you on. We like your expertise. And you also Mayor Pro Tem of City Council for McGregor, right?
Woodway.
Mm-hmm. Why do I keep messing it up? It's Woodway.
It's okay. They're right next to each other.
Right next to Woodway. And it's interesting, like how I'll say how we finagle our way here at MCC into getting positions. So like my background is more of working with political parties, nonprofits, campaigns, some government work, but yours is like your work and background is really into that local city government, and you work for several city governments, so you have a good understanding. But before we get into that, right? So we're gonna delve into that, like city government work, what it really looks like. People often look at the national stage, but the city government is what runs your everyday life.
Absolutely.
Every day, like even to that dog, because I'm a person that don't like the people that walk their dogs without a leash. I'm like,
well, that's illegal.
Right.
In most cities, it's illegal. You have a leash law.
Right. So we have a leash law. So I'm one of those citizens who actually, when I'm at Cameron Park, I'm calling. But I do want to get started. Like I do want to talk about your background. Like we growing up and like your mother raising 6 children, right?
Correct.
Like, tell us about that.
All right, so I'm the youngest of 6 kids. Growing up in the late 60s, early 70s. My father passed away when I was 3 years old, so 1968, 69 time frame. And my mother never remarried. And so I learned a lot of valuable lessons, you know, being in a single parent household, a lot of different things that obviously as an African American, we had to deal with, if you will. My mother didn't have an education. She didn't have a whole lot of work experience and things of that nature. She grew up in a time where she worked in the fields. And so as a young lady, before she got married in the deep South, Mississippi, she had to go work in the fields very early. And then when she met my father and they got married and moved to Indiana, she pretty much was a stay-at-home mom for the number of years that they were together before he passed. And so she really didn't do much of anything outside of maybe some domestic work, you know, cleaning houses, cleaning buildings, and things of that nature, which didn't bring a whole lot of income into the household. So I learned a lot about how to do without, you know, but as a kid, you know, you don't want to not be able to do the things that other kids do,
right?
You know. But I grew up in a neighborhood where that was the case for a lot of kids. But going to school, meeting people, if you will, from the other side of the tracks, you know, and seeing how they lived their lives. And they came from all colors, you know, black, white. You know, I had black friends just as well as white friends whose parents were, because it was more of an industrial community where I lived, their parents were foremen, you know, at factories. They worked in factories. They made good money, but again, my father, you know, having passed away early, that wasn't our case. And so it was difficult growing up. But the one thing I recall, my mother always said, boy, get an education. Yep. Because she understood that there was a connection between an education and becoming someone. So that's one of the, I think, the most valuable lesson that I learned coming up.
It's interesting you say about like just comparing yourself to other students and your peers. I know when I was growing up, with my community, we all was in poverty. So I didn't know I was even poor until I realized what poverty was. I had to be middle school before I even realized that, we are poor. We are the stats that they speak about. Yeah. And how did it affect you? This is knowing that.
Well, I found that out early because, like I said, you know, I did have friends, people that I knew growing up that were black as well. And their parents were working in factories, or their parents worked at the hospital or at Ball State University. So they had, and they quickly would let you know,
I got you.
You poor.
You different.
You can't wear the same shoes that we wear.
Oh, wow.
And you would see that. You're like, oh yeah, I guess you're right, you know. And so it was difficult because, kids can be brutal, you know, and they'll call you out on stuff. If you weren't wearing what they were wearing, they'll let you know about it in a heartbeat. And so I found out very early on that, yes, we didn't have a whole lot. But my mother, she did as best she could. One of the things that she did coming up, her and my father bought this old house.
Okay.
And that house is still in the family.
Okay.
And it gave us a level of stability that a lot of other kids didn't have. And even though it wasn't the best house, it was a home. And a lot of kids moved around quite a bit, where we had I think a little bit more stability in that regard.
So as you get older, you start matriculating through high school in Indiana, then you go to college in Indiana. Tell me about those experiences.
High school was, obviously was great. I mean, I'm from a basketball state. So basketball is king, right? And so I played sports from the time I can remember elementary on up. And back in those days, you had to compete. You didn't know, if you were in the fourth grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, your parents didn't just pay and you go play.
Right.
And everybody played.
Right.
No, we had school basketball, and you had to try out at that age.
Okay.
You had to make the team, and we had cuts, and kids would get cut, and of course they would be mad. So I was able to play, and I was good enough to play all the way up until high school. And then I started playing more football than basketball.
Okay.
And so that part really helped me get through school, not from the standpoint of academics, but just wanting to be there. Because most of my friends, they dropped out.
Okay.
Most of my friends actually dropped out of high school. And me playing sports was one of those things that helped me. It didn't necessarily was the only thing, because I really did like school to a certain extent.
Okay.
I like being smart. In fact, my friends would call me Mr. Professor. And I say, it's kind of apropos right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I am a professor.
Yeah.
But back then, I used to think that I knew it all, and I would say stuff and I'd correct them, and they was like, oh, okay, Mr. Professor. And so they, euphemistically, they would call me Mr. Professor. And so going to school was something that I enjoyed doing, but at the same time, there was this pull with my friends, to do the things that they were doing. Not necessarily getting in trouble, things of that nature, but just hanging out, not doing your homework and that kind of thing. And fortunately, I had enough of the ability, to just, by rote memory, be able to do things in school. So as an honor student, I did well. I graduated in the top 50 in my class, which was almost 400 students. Was pretty decent, honor student. And I had teachers that were there that really kind of helped, keep me on track. And so, you're going to go to college, John? Yeah, I'm going to go play basketball. I'm going to play football. No. You're going to.
Right.
Sports are only going to get you so far.
Right.
But you're going to be somebody. You're going to go to school. You're going to be able to get through college. And but at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about academics as far as academic scholarships or even though they were there, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion about financial aid, especially.
Right.
And so I learned very late about how those things work. I had a counselor, quite frankly, I don't think he could care any less than whether or not I was going to go to college. And to him, I probably was just one of those additional individuals that he can, And it's ironic, I was talking to my wife not that long ago, and I was like, that counselor never talked to me about college, not one time. Not one time did he ever say, hey, it was teachers or other people in the school that kept reinforcing, that I'm going to go to college. And so getting through high school wasn't a hard thing to do. The hardest part was just the idea of wanting to do what the friends wanted to do and be social and that kind of thing and play sports. And but again, I was able to make it through the work, and I took the harder. I could have graduated after my junior year of high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had all my credit hours. I never took any study hall. I just took all academic classes. So after my junior year in high school, I had enough credits to graduate. I stayed my senior year because I played sports.
Yeah, of course.
And so, it was fun though. I enjoyed high school. Now going to college, it was a little different. I met my wife my first year in college, and we ended up having my son.
So you knew that was the love of your life once you saw her, huh?
Yeah. No, actually, yes. I mean, life can throw you a curveball in a lot of respects. because I had intended on meeting anyone, and
Right.
intended on being single for
Right.
a while. But I met my wife, and we got involved in a relationship, and subsequently we had my oldest son.
Okay.
My sophomore year in high school, we had him.
In high school.
No, college.
Okay, college.
Sophomore year in college,
Okay, we in
had
college.
him.
I was like, sophomore year in high school, Joe, you started real
Well, no,
early.
I know people.
It's okay.
A lot of my friends and family members are in that category.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that was the reason why I was
yeah.
like, no, I'm gonna stay away from that.
Okay.
But my sophomore year, I did have my son, and then my junior year we got married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was 20 years old when I got married, going on 21.
Did you stay in school?
My son was premature.
Okay.
And so he had a lot of hospital issues. So after my end of my junior year, I left college, went to the
Okay.
military, then I finished up.
Okay.
I got my bachelor's degree, and then I went to graduate school when I got out of the military.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah. And then my wife, she was a stay-at-home mom for the first 10 years, and then she ended up going to college, because she hadn't gone to college. She had
Right.
just graduated high school. So she hadn't gone to college, and when we got back from the military, she
Okay.
started college.
Okay.
And so, but then she ended up getting her administrator's license, and she's work over at Region 12 now. So,
Good.
so,
I
yeah.
remember, so off camera, John and I was having this conversation about just our students and their workload, and them working 2 and 3 jobs sometimes, and going to college, and going to UTC, and understanding that in the summertime, if you're taking 2 classes in a summer session of 6 weeks, you're really taking, it's like a 40-hour work week, just school alone.
Absolutely.
And the time it takes to actually dedicate yourself to getting that education. So, and Joan said, I did it, Felicia, I've done it. So I think that's a good story to hear, that sometimes our students don't understand that we did struggle, we did go through things.
Absolutely.
But they just think we're just perfect.
Absolutely. As we were saying, married, had 3 kids.
3 kids.
My wife, she's going to school full time. I'm going to graduate school full time, and I'm working in a factory full time plus overtime. And I talk to my kids and my sons about this quite a bit, and I said, you do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And you get through it. Is it hard? Yes. But the things that you value, you invest in. So I don't care what it is. That if you buy a house, you value that, you invest in it. If you want that car, you're going to value whatever the car is, and you will invest into it as much as you want to. So that's the way life is, in my opinion. So if you value education, you will invest in it. And whether it's money, whether it's time, energy, you're going to invest in it. And you understand that it may not be easy to get through,
Right.
but you do it because you know that the end game is where you're trying to get to.
Gotcha. Good lesson, good life lesson. I'm so glad we're recording your interview, because I want our students to understand that it's not all easy. It's a struggle, but you can take your time, get through it, make a plan. You might have to work, but you have to put the time in to dedicate. So really, really important. Okay, now as you're matriculating through, so you having children, you're going to grad school, you finding your purpose. Tell me how you find your purpose, even work in city government.
Well, that goes back to when I was a kid too, to a certain extent. So when I was in high school, I took accounting, and I was like, oh yeah, I like accounting, I like the numbers, and I was like, well, I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to be in business, be a businessman. And I'm going to make as much money as I can, because, of course, you don't have any money. That's what your focus is.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Man, I want money.
The money.
And so even though that's not the end-all, be-all. And so high school, taking accounting, going to college, and with the idea of going into the business school. Indiana University actually has one of the toughest business schools to get into in the country.
Yeah.
Kelley School of Business.
Kelley.
And so I looked into that, and I was like, I don't know. I took my prereqs, and I was like, man, I just don't know. And again, after my sophomore year, having my son, with him having his health issues, those things were really tough. And before I had applied to the business school, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, a friend of mine talked to me about School of Public and Environmental Affairs, government. And little did I realize that my idea of what I wanted to do career-wise really had a lot to do with service. It really had a lot to do with community building and things of that nature. I just didn't understand how that worked until I got to college. Yeah. So business was my only construct of what I could do to make money and to help people, so to speak. And so finding out about the School of Public and Environmental Affairs really fit well with me, because I really thought, being a poor young black man coming out of the inner city with no father, living the life that I live, doesn't do me any good to complain about the system.
Right.
What I need to do is be a part of changing the system.
Got you.
And government is that vehicle for me to do that. Now, you can do that in the business world as well. You see professional athletes that have a lot of money, they can invest in community, or you can see people who are doctors going to communities that have been historically underserved, and educators and things of that nature. But government for me was that vehicle, because I felt like everything that we do in life, government has something to do with.
Yes.
You can't get away from it.
At all. Can't run it.
I figured that out early on in life, and I figured that government is that avenue that can help me help people to the best of my abilities.
Now, was your program just as grueling as my program was? I did the public policy program at the University of Maryland. It was grueling. Did you do it in 2 years? You did it like in 3 or 4 years?
I did it in 2.5, because I took one semester and did a half term. The program that I was in, your typical master's program was like 30 hours.
Right.
Mine was like 48.
Okay.
So you had quite a few more, and there was, in fact, it set you up to have a joint degree if you wanted it. You can have an MPA or MSES as a joint degree with another year, or you can have a JD MPA, a jurisprudence or lawyer law degree, and the MPA at the same time. If I had taken that extra year, I would have been a lawyer. Because I took enough law classes.
We took a lot of law. We took a lot of
law
classes.
And public policy, law and human resources, all those things.
Health policy was the hardest for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we did that, as well as we did the environmental science side of it. And I wasn't a big science student, but again, in high school I did take some sciences and things of that nature, but I wasn't a big science student. So I think that really kind of set me on a path to being able to help people. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to articulate that back in high school, but as I went to college, I figured that out.
And I think that's really important, because here we have pathways now, and each pathway has a path, and they understand the path, and people get into liberal arts. They're like, I kind of want to help people. Maybe I'll be a nurse. I don't know how to. Is it they don't know about all the various career paths you can take in government and what you can do. And so I think it's us getting that out there, saying, hey, it's a plethora of things you can do to accomplish these goals. You want to work in community. So now you got your master's. Now, your first job, tell me about that job. How did it in Indiana, right?
Yes.
So tell me about that. What was that?
My first job was I was a self-employed contractor.
Self-employed contractor.
Contractor with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Indiana.
Yes.
So at that time, Janet Reno was the Attorney General. And they were wanting to do something in the city of Gary, Indiana.
You just can't say Janet Reno and not say anything. People look up Janet Reno and Clinton, and then come back to this episode.
Yes, yes. It was a time where there was this transition in Indiana and Gary in particular that they were struggling. And so I would go to the Career Center, and there were different jobs that I looked at, but the director of the Career Center, he said, John, this will be great for you.
Okay.
He knew my personality. He knew what I was kind of wanting to do in life. And he said, this will be great way to get your foot in the door of working with, the government, as well as working with nonprofits. Yeah. And I said, okay. He said, you'll have an opportunity to work with different levels of government as well. And so, which he was absolutely correct. So having gone to the military, I knew a little bit about how the federal government worked, but it's different. Being in the military is a little different than being a federal senior executive if you were going to be in a job, if you will, civil servant job. And so starting out there, I had never done this before, but I put together a steering committee. Okay. But I learned a lot. I tell people all the time, take a step back for just a second. I tell people this all the time, that the program I went to Indiana University, is one of the best programs in the
Yeah.
country. Not to discount any of the other programs. Texas has a good program. Harvard has a good program.
University of
Maryland has a good
College
program.
Park has a good program.
Yes, they do. They do. Syracuse. I mean,
Yep,
those are the
Syracuse
ones that
has a
I
good
know.
program, has a
Maxwell
good team.
School.
Princeton has a good program.
Princeton has.
Yeah.
So they all, and Indiana University is right there on par with all of those schools.
Yeah.
In fact, they are known in the DC loop as one of the schools that people go to. And so I learned a lot academically about how things should be. And so I was able to put that into practice at a very early stage of my career, even though I had never worked in that arena
Gotcha.
initially. I think one of the things that helped me was the fact that I had been in the military, and I learned a lot in the military about working with professionals and things of that nature. I think I was like 32, 33 at the time. And so, and having been married, those things helped me. So building this steering committee of people was critical to what we were trying to do, what Janet Reno and Clinton, people like that were trying to do in revitalizing distressed communities, right? And so I was able to pull together important leaders in the community that were part of nonprofit organizations, part of your hospitals, work with various levels of law enforcement through the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they were working with, they actually had created this task force called the Gary Response Investigative Team, the GRIT Task Force.
GRIT, okay.
And it had
we love our
local,
acronyms.
absolutely, the government, the federal government. They
love the acronyms, okay.
So they had local government, local law enforcement, shall I say. Then it had all the federal law enforcement agencies that were there, the DEA, ATF, FBI. All these agencies were in that area, as well as State of Indiana Police Department, state police. It's a little bit different than here in Texas, but it's the same. State police, and again, the local police departments, which was a regional approach. So you had Gary, you had Highland, you had East Chicago, Hammond, all these smaller communities in Northwest Indiana. And so working with these different groups, I went to a lot of different conferences on policing, community-oriented policing and things of that nature, crime prevention through environmental design. So learning these things and trying to put them into works as far as working with nonprofit organizations. How do you take or remove or prevent crime from coming into a community and then seed in activity, economic activity that will help push that away. And so the program is called Weed and Seed, weed out crime, seed in economic development. So that was great for a young person who was starting to get involved in local government and also nonprofits, because it takes, you hear this term, it takes a village, but it takes a variety of organizations to make this work in some of those communities that are really experiencing some of these bad things that are happening in the community. A city just can't, especially a city like Gary, it couldn't do it on its own.
Right.
Now, the lesson learned there was that they didn't want anybody there to help them. I mean, that's my opinion. That's my opinion. They had a very hard time accepting outsiders who came in and tried to give them the help that they needed. They wanted to fix their problems themselves, which just wasn't happening.
Right.
Yeah. First of all, there was too many silos.
Gotcha.
So this group here, and they had some strong leaders in those groups, and I learned that about leadership too. I know we're going to talk a little bit about leadership later.
No, it's fine.
But what I learned with these nonprofit organizations is that these leaders, these organizations started to take on the personality of the leader.
Gotcha.
So if you like this leader in this organization, you like that organization.
Gotcha.
And that organization, oftentimes those leaders were there 10, 20, 30 years.
Right.
And so they are not going anywhere.
Right.
And they would butt heads, you know. This person, Mrs. So-and-so, is not friends with Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. This Gary Urban Enterprise Organization doesn't work well with the Urban League or whatever, you know. And there was a lot of factions going on in silos and conflict as to what should we do.
Yeah.
And it was tough. It was really tough. And unfortunately, Gary continues to have that same problem that they have. Now, I'll give you a case in point. If you study transportation planning, they say if you have a community that has major transportation arteries, then you should see significant significant economic development, because that's where people are going to go, right? Well, Gary is right there on the 80-90 highway, east-west highway.
Yeah.
It probably still is, but when I was there in the early 90s, mid to early 90s, it was the most traveled stretch of highway in the country.
Okay.
The Borman Expressway.
So you can
look it up.
Tons of commercial.
Oh, absolutely. But they didn't have any. They had,
wow.
Well, let me take that back. They had, I think, one truck stop in maybe a 8-mile stretch.
It could be like even local people from community making their own little stretch there.
Yeah, they didn't have anything. If you didn't see a hotel chain until you got over into, I think, either Munster or Hammond somewhere.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's still that way. I mean, it's the strangest thing. You know, if you drive down 35, you're going to see all kind of hotels and eateries and all that, but not there. You still don't see it.
But it's interesting you're explaining this with Gary, Indiana, and I've been to several cities and worked with several cities around U.S., and that's the same problem. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And like just them accepting me to come work with any organization I was working with, and what I could do, and using my expertise that I was okay with using in those communities, and environmental design and understanding that, what we learned about in grad school, and like how that really plays and affects on the community, and how structure and design interesting. Yeah. You can take that almost. I can list at least 10 major cities right there that I know for a fact that's happening in.
Yeah. But then you have cities like Baltimore that's kind of turned around.
I didn't want to bring that up.
Yeah, they turned around.
They did, but when I was there, it was a little scary. I'm not going to get, because I was there after The Wire was created. It was in creating The Wire. It was, and you could see how they was turning around. How they were selling property cheaper. People was buying and investing in the community, and you could see, and their city theme was believe, actually. Yeah. Just like believe. I'm like, ooh.
Well, they lost a major economic boom.
Yeah.
The football program.
Oh, yeah.
So when the Colts left and came to Indiana, that didn't help them. No. You know, but they got the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, it's ironic because when you talk about local government and how local government operates, local government obviously is about tax dollars.
Yes.
And it's about where those dollars are going to come from.
Yes.
And for community to grow, people got to want to be there. And
yes.
so not just the fact that you got to have things for them to want to be there for,
correct.
As well as, you know, properties, what are properties looking yes. like, what's the housing stock look like in general, jobs and things of that nature. And so sports obviously is a major catalyst. And teams that cities that have lost these teams have try to do whatever they can to get them back, or places like Las Vegas that didn't have professional sports, even though it's the gambling capital of the world, if you want to call it that. Look what they've done as far as sports are concerned. I mean, they now have professional football, they're going after professional basketball, baseball, hockey. I mean, so they're expanding because they know that the economic development that goes with that is astronomical. Los Angeles, they're going back and forth. They've gotten teams, they lost teams. San Diego's struggling right now because of the fact that they lost the San Diego Chargers. And I know it costs a lot of money to build stadiums and things of that nature. But when you look at how much money is impacting the community once it's there, it's a no-brainer. Because what does that do for the average citizen? It keeps your property taxes, all the other taxation that you have, it keeps it lower.
Right.
Not as high as it could be, let's put it that way.
And it's interesting looking at our Waco community. And maybe because I'm from Waco, but I was away for so long, so as an insider, outsider coming back in, I do see the effects of RG3 from Baylor. Like once he came and played and Baylor got well known, and people were like, wait a minute, what about this little city we call Waco? So I could see the positive impacts that one player had on our community.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to keep going. I know I hit some spots with that one. We're going to keep going. So you work in city government. You come to Texas. You pick a little town, Waco, to come work in Parks and Recs, and you learn more about city government. Tell me some lessons you learned about city government here in Parks and Recs with Waco.
In Waco?
In Waco.
Lessons I learned is, and this was a hard lesson, but I pride myself on having good relationships.
Yes.
In fact, I tell the students today, I said, everything you do in life is built on relationships. So you have family relationships, whether it's your children, your spouse, your extended family, and these relationships are important, right? And if you have good relationships, you have typically good outcomes, better outcomes, okay? Doesn't guarantee that, but I'm just saying typically relationships that are good lead to better outcomes. Let's take a marriage relationship. If your relationship is bad in a marriage, it's not going anywhere. Yeah,
it's not going to last.
It's not going to last, okay? And so what is it about relationships then that's important? Well, it's how you build these relationships. Okay. It's how you are able to give and take in these relationships. And what I learned in Waco is that, one, I pride myself again on expectations. I didn't learn the expectations. I put that on me. I didn't learn what the expectations are. I typically, personally, as a leader, I always say, I can't hold you as an employee to me accountable for something that I haven't told you what those expectations are. Okay. So I can't hold you accountable for expectations that I haven't expressed what those expectations are. Okay. Well, in Waco, it's a two-side street. So if me as a leader, that's how I feel. But as an employee, I feel the same way. I feel as though you can't hold me accountable for expectations that you haven't expressed those expectations to me. Right? Gotcha. And as an employee, I feel like, well, sometimes you need to go and find out what the expectations are if they're not expressed. Gotcha. That's the lesson I learned here. Never had to do that before because I've had really good leaders that have expressed expectations. Gotcha. Even if they were expectations that I didn't want to live up to, like in the military. I knew what they were. Now, whether or not I wanted to be a part of those levels of expectation was my choice. And when I had an opportunity to say either I'm going to re-up, re-enlist, or leave the military, then I can make a decision based on information that I had available. Well, here, unfortunately, I never really figured out what the expectations were. And I failed myself in trying to find out what they were. So that was a big lesson for me. That's part of the reason why, in my opinion, I'm not there any longer.
I think that's big, though. Even looking at our students, and that I'm on the retention committee for our students, and I think that we've come back to clearly defining what college is and the level of expectations we have for their success in college.
Exactly.
That's big. Yeah. I don't think it's some no.
Yeah, and I think also that, like I said, the second part of that is, as an individual, it's incumbent upon us to say, well, what do you expect of me?
Right.
You know, what do you want out of me? What should I do? And sometimes we forget that part. As individuals, we forget to ask those questions, and we just find ourselves floundering because of that.
Oh, and it's so important. It's funny, like because I've learned that life lesson over the year dealing with family members. And I'm like, the relationship has some issues. I know I'm diverting, but I feel like this is really important. And I always self-reflect. I think I do more self-reflect too much sometimes. And I'm like, what could I have done better to make this relationship become better? And I feel like my level of expectations wasn't clear. I wasn't clear about my level of expectations. And when that person didn't meet my level, I could have communicated better. I could have communicated better. So I think that's a really good life lesson to learn. That's in general. Yeah, really good. All right, I'm not gonna digress on my personal experience. We'll keep going.
All right.
Okay, now you decided to run for council member. What made you run for council member for your Woodway community?
Well, a few years ago, you see property. Well, it's helpful for me because my property has gone up in value. So,
but your tax dollars is going up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, while I'm seeing the property values go up, and I'm happy about that. I'm not happy about having to pay more tax.
Of course.
More property tax. Now, of course, the property tax rate hasn't gone up. It's just the value has gone up, which has significantly increased my taxes. And so I started thinking about this and said, well, wait a second. What's going to happen down the line, when I retire and I'm on a fixed income and property continues to escalate?
So how much has yours increased?
My property taxes probably have gone up at least a third since I've been here.
How many years?
7 years.
Wow.
Oh yeah, because my property in my house has more than doubled. The value of my house
That's
is more than
big.
doubled. Oh yeah.
In 7 years.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's more than double.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
So I'm happy about that because I can
Right.
sell it and make a lot
But
of
where
money.
you gonna
off
buy a property? Where you gonna buy a home at?
There you go.
There you
Yeah.
go. Okay. So okay, you decided I'm gonna stay out. Cause tell us your story.
Okay, so as I look toward the future, I was like, I've been thinking about it. I said, I want to kind of get back into government. I've been out of government for a few years
Right.
because of what happened at Waco. I said, this will give me a chance to kind of get
Right.
into get involved. And my neighbor is a council member as well. So
Okay.
she's like, we got a seat open. You ought
Okay.
to run. And I was like, eh. So I didn't do it the first time.
Okay.
And then the second time she asked me again, she said, you ought to run. We got a seat open. You ought to run. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I talked to my wife and we said, yeah, that'd be good for you. And looking at where Waco is going to go
Yes.
in the future
Okay.
is what really kind of drove me to that because I was like, well, Woodway is a small community.
Right.
We pretty much landlocked.
Right.
All right, and there's not a whole lot of land to be built out as far
Correct.
as residential and even commercial. Commercial kind of comes and goes. I mean, companies go in and then they may fail and go
Right.
out. So you can reutilize those properties, all right? But housing stock, on the other hand, is going up, but it's gonna hit its plateau. It's gonna hit its peak
Right.
here pretty soon because
Right.
there's just not a whole lot of available land.
Right. Okay.
And if we don't grow our tax base, then the burden is going to continue to be on those who are there. And if the community continues to, as me specifically, I'm getting older and we're having more and more people who are retiring,
Okay.
then that's going to be a shifting toward individuals who are on a fixed income, even though
Right.
they have a more substantial income in general. But still, it's a fixed income.
Right.
Okay. And so that's one of the things I wanted to take a look at is, well, what can we do to encourage economic development in Woodway?
Okay.
And how is that going to be possible?
Okay. So what are you guys looking to do?
Well, right now we're doing a quarter plan, an 84 quarters. It's a strategic plan.
Okay.
And how we're going to look at property and how we're going to look at zoning and things of that nature in the Woodway area. So
Okay.
that's the first step.
Okay.
And then some of the things that we haven't talked a whole lot about, but as a group, but I've been thinking about is, well, how do you utilize incentives to have businesses there? And
Right.
do we have the wherewithal to do that? Do we have the property to do that?
Right.
I mean, Waco does.
Right.
I mean, and Waco, you can see with this box, this recycling company that's coming in. I mean, when I was reading that article about that, I said, that's the kind of thing they should be doing because you have land that's out there that is available and the city can play along with the real estate development
Okay.
community and offering up these incentives. We have TIF zones, which we don't have in Woodway.
Yeah,
You have-
those TIF stones interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna come. We're gonna keep moving on that.
But
Okay.
but there are tools.
There are tools.
You know, and
This
then
is-
you
the
have
funding is very interesting to
abatements
me.
and things.
Yeah.
You have tax abatements, which again are tools. You
Yeah,
don't have to
tools.
use
I'm
those,
with you.
but they're there.
Yeah.
You know, Plano did a great. I think personally, they did a great job, along with the state of Texas, when they offered up incentives for Toyota to go to Plano.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're talking about hundreds of millions of
Oh, yeah.
dollars, billions of dollars worth of economic
Yes.
value over time,
Yes.
and jobs.
Yes. So I got you. So you're thinking with Woodway is looking at the community, look at the aging of the community and how we bring in, because that was my next kind of point we want to talk about, bringing in maybe some commercial into Woodway. Okay.
And we do have a younger group of folks who are moving in because they're newer homes and they're bringing
Right.
their families and things of that nature, and which is good. But we got to also want to continue to, when folks are no longer in their homes, they pass away or what have you, and those homes become available, we got to be able to market to that younger generation
Right.
of individuals. Not to say that they'll be the only ones, because you market to who you market to, right?
Right.
But we know that there will be people who come in who have kids and things of that nature. So what does Woodway offer you?
Right.
Why
Yeah.
would you want to be there?
I
So those are the
agree.
kind of things that we have to talk about.
I think that's good, John, because when I think of Woodway, I think of a more aging or older community. And I think that the fact that you guys are keeping that conversation going and willing to look at that and see how you can keep that community development. Because people I know live in Woodway are older. I mean, nice homes. But yeah, that's where I go for my outdoor barbecue. my little events the Woodway homes, my friends.
There you go.
We just do.
Well, you're more than welcome to come over there.
Oh, for a barbecue for you? Oh, no, I'm gonna take it when they offer. Look, but I'm gonna say I don't want an Indiana barbecue. I want some good Texas. So Indiana's better than Texas?
Oh, well, from where I'm from.
Okay.
Well, you know.
That's why I say, look, we can be the judge of that.
Well, I can cook you some ribs, and you'll probably say, okay, now those are different than Texas.
Okay.
And they taste better.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. My brother-in-law, I mean, he can throw down some ribs. He grew up working with a guy in Illinois, and they had this big rig that they would go out and do events and stuff like that. So, man, he's got the best barbecue, the best brisket, pulled pork that I've ever tasted, no matter where I've gone. I've not tasted anywhere where I've gone that tastes better than his. His meat stands on its own, doesn't have to put barbecue sauce on it. That's what I judge it by.
Okay, I do too. Yeah. The best barbecue I have had, I did, this was not going to go into, but I promise you guys, barbecue is not part of my questions. Outside the state of Texas was in Detroit. Now, so if it can beat the Detroit instead of Texas barbecue, you going to something.
All right.
Alrighty.
I have to
So your favorite food is barbecue then?
No. Probably my favorite food is Chinese.
Is it real Chinese food or American?
Authentic Chinese food. Yes.
So where do you get some authentic Chinese food from?
Well, you have to meet people.
Right, I agree.
And then you have to work with them, and then they'll cook you up some stuff.
Okay.
Right? So I've met a couple of folks. I do a little cooking myself. So I've gotten some recipes, and I cook myself a lot of times.
Yeah,
But also at different places, like my wife and I, we were down in Houston.
Okay.
A couple of weeks ago.
They got a good Chinese home. Yeah.
Little hole in the wall, but man, it was like, ooh, my goodness.
Yeah, see, I got my first dose of Chinese food. My graduate school roommate was talking about graduate school. It's interesting. Her name was Jennifer. That's his American name, but she's from the country land. So she had 7 siblings, which is abnormal in China. But she went to Beijing, but she would cook me good Chinese food. But and so they live in the countryside, and they work the fields, so they could keep a big family. But that's when I had my first dose of real Chinese. I'm like, oh, what I've been eating. And Chinese New Year, she invite all her friends over. We have Chinese New Year.
What you've been eating is Americanized.
Yes, Americanized.
Chinese, until you meet somebody.
Yeah. All right, so favorite book. That is a must read. Everybody should read.
I am not a voracious reader. I will put that on the table.
Good adjective.
Yeah. Or some would say, I don't read a lot.
Right.
But I was thinking about that when you had asked me that question. I was like, man. So I went back and I started looking at some books that I had at home. And I was like, wow, this was a good book. It's called A Painted House.
A Painted House?
Yes, by John Grisham.
John Grisham.
Yeah. And it's based on his upbringing, if you will. It's about a 7-year-old kid who they grew up in Arkansas. And they poor family, cotton farmers. And so it's the whole idea of the struggle of how to make it, and how to be successful on this farm. It's a hard life. It's a grind, right? People work hard. And so and the story has some sports along with it. Even I'm not a big baseball person. I played baseball a little bit in high school and when I was a little kid coming up, but I didn't. After my freshman year, I was done with baseball. But this book talks about an individual named Stan Musial who played for the St. Louis Cardinals. And Stan he's a Hall of Famer, and so he was a good baseball player. And so this little kid, this little 7-year-old, they couldn't wait for when the baseball games came on. They would they would all gather around this radio, because back then, that's all you had was a radio.
Right.
And the family would listen to the baseball games. And so, it's a book about, family life, and one of the things I always wanted was a family, you know, and you know, my mother, like I said, my father having passed away, you know, I always said when I was a little kid, I said, I'm gonna have 6 kids. Where do you think I got 6 from? Well, because I had 6 kids in my family. But I ended up with 3, and that was enough. But I always had this idea about family, you know, and the importance of family. And that's kind of what this book was about, how the struggle is. But families stay together. Families stick together. They work together, they work hard in a time where it was not easy, you know. And so that was a good book for me.
Interesting. Now I'm contemplating what the irony of in the painted house. So is it supposed to,
Well, that was
if I
part
have
of it.
an unpainted house, am I undone? Am I unfinished? Am I
never
not
really thought about it that way, but there is some painting that's going on for the house itself. Just bringing that house back around, you know,
to give it life.
Whitewashing the house, as they called it back in those days. Yeah.
And it's interesting because look, well, John, you make me every time I talk to John. This is why I like talking to John, even offside camera. I always have a reflective moment. So right now I'm doing some work on my house, and I hadn't whitewashed or like cleaned my home in a while. I've been just going through some stuff, and I noticed just the importance of having it cleaned on the outside and just me cleaning it, and how it makes me feel happy to come home and see it clean.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it kind of changes my mood when I go outside.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize just having my porch and having the front area cleaned up and what we're doing, how it's changing the environment and me and how we feel about being home.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. Yes. So it caused me to spend more money, John, on my line, because I feel like I want this feeling. So we're redoing a fence, the porch. So we're adding costs. All right. We talked about like your life things happen. So I want to know who inspires you? Who inspires John to get up every morning?
Well, today, who inspires me? My wife.
Okay.
My wife inspires me because my wife had breast cancer and thyroid cancer.
Oh, wow.
And so to see her come through that, she's fine. She's fine now. And how she worked through it, and she continued to work, and her coworkers said, "We don't see how you do it." She said, "Well, it's a lot of prayer.
Yeah.
You know, just trusting in the Lord." And so that inspires me.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been married for going on 37 years now.
A long time.
Yeah,
It's almost
so we grew up together, as we were saying before.
You will, yeah, because you
literally
became almost 2 different people. You probably did like a whole,
Yeah.
Did you was at your age of 19, 17? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, that inspires me because she, you know, she didn't complain. You know, she was just like, you know. Yeah. Well, I won't say not one time, but yeah. But she wasn't a complainer. Put it that way. It wasn't a habitual thing.
That takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it wasn't a habitual thing, and she wasn't, you know, just like woe is me. You know, she wasn't that way. So that was inspirational. You know, and of course this was going through the time after I had lost my job with the city of Waco as well. So you know, I was like, okay, but yeah, that inspires me. But you know, just in general, just getting up, knowing that, you know, I can do something that's meaningful. Yeah. You know, and the Bible says, "No greater love does a man have than to lay down his life for a friend."
Oh, wow.
You know? So
lay down your life for a friend, John.
So if you're talking about, you know, but you don't have to do that per se. But in a sense, what we do for others is important.
It's very.
You know, and we can go through life and we can amass a lot of things, you know, in life, you know. You can gain the whole world and lose your soul, as the Bible says. But what do you have that's going to reflect on who you are character-wise and how you've made your community better? Yeah. You know, and that inspires me, is to be able to say, I do this because I want to help. Yeah. You know, and it goes back to, you know, just the dynamic of who I am and where I come from, and how that impacted me on a daily basis. And so hopefully I can be a positive to somebody else.
Yeah. Are you seeing that as you become a professor at MCC? Tell me about what are you learning as a professor now?
I'm learning that it's like my wife used to always say, she's an educator too, kids want to learn.
Yeah.
and they want structured. But
Yeah.
these are sometimes grown-ups in
Yeah.
college, and they're beyond high school, some in high school do
Right,
credit,
right.
but they want to learn. The question is, how do you get them to that point?
Okay.
And learning how to, my wife used to say, you have to understand pedagogy. You have to understand how to teach. There are a lot of people out there who are teachers but don't know how to teach.
Okay.
And she said, if you can learn anything, that's what you should learn. Learn
Okay.
how to reach students. And she was very good at that when she was in actual classroom.
Okay.
So now she teaches teachers how to teach. And she works with, superintendents and principals on how to be better leaders and things of that nature, as well as coaching teachers on how to be better at what they do.
Yeah.
And so me being a teacher, being a professor, I'm learning that we always hear this, everybody learns differently, but
Right.
now I'm understanding that more
Right.
specifically,
Right.
oh, this person is really more of an auditory learner.
Right.
They can care less what I have up on the board.
Right.
They're listening though.
Right.
And some of them are watching and they're tuning me out, And so it's the little things. And so I'm learning that the more students are staying engaged, the more they're picking up.
Yes.
And it goes back to what I've learned, about how the human mind works.
Yeah. Okay.
And one of the things I try to get these students to understand is that if you participate and you engage on a daily basis in the lectures and even in the with Brightspace and with discussion boards and things of
Yeah.
that nature, the mind is a funny thing, right? It will pick up those things. The more you engage in it, the more likely you are to learn it.
Right.
Because what the mind also does is, if you're just watching someone with a PowerPoint and you're not reading it, not paying
Right.
attention, the mind is saying, I wonder what I'm going to eat for lunch today.
It is.
My boss got me so mad last night that, and guess what that's doing? That's shutting you off from learning something
Yeah.
else. So if you can train your mind to stay focused,
Yeah.
and that's hard, but the easiest way to train your mind to stay focused is to talk, is to
Yes.
engage. And that's what I tried to teach them. Engage, ask questions, and I ask a lot of questions in lecture. I'm probing, I'm constantly probing. What do you think?
Right.
And I give them a second, and I give
Right.
them time. And if not, I will call on someone. So we try to get that exchange going, because I know, I've learned that helps you learn.
Right. Yes. Yeah. 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 I'm learning that too. Because when we in our schooling, we become subject matter experts.
Mm-hmm.
But now I had to learn the pedagogy of teaching and look at the various pedagogies and what pedagogy fits with my personality as well. And look at sometimes the demographics of our students to say, sometimes I got to change something in this aspect of pedagogy so they can get it and learn. In a generation that's consumed with 30 seconds of entertainment or TikToks and Instagram, so how do I pull them? And I tell my students often, I'm like, it's only two professions that engage with the whole community consistently every day. That's police officers and public school teachers. We're engaging with all types of people from community. How do you litigate? How do you monitor that? How do you deal with people? I've never learned that we put so much on public school teachers until I really became teaching. When we're dealing with, and the most thing about my teaching that I'm fearful of, it has nothing to do with my teaching, because I'm a subject matter expert. I know the content, is the mental health of our students.
Yes.
And catching that. Because I'm not a mental health expert, but I'm the first phase that Mike can see something that is not as abnormal from a student that I really don't know I'm getting to know. So that's scary to me. And I say this sometimes even in our meetings. So just the mental health aspect and us understanding that. So we're doing seminars and professional development on mental health, ADA, just disabilities, both learning and physical disabilities. So how do I make sure I teach this content to this varied students we have at a community college?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but like you say, it's trying to personalize your approach as best you can.
Agreed.
And you can't go one-on-one with every student, but
Right.
you can try to bring out information or try to understand that student a little bit better.
Right.
It's hard. But That's what we're here for.
Right.
I mean, quite honestly.
It is.
And my philosophy is students are here to learn, but we're here to make sure that they learn.
Got you.
To a certain extent.
I'm with you, John.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And I know there are some who say, well, if they don't want to learn it, then I can't help them. Well, I understand the idea of that, but part of our job is to try to get them there as best we can, at least try to get them there. And at least that's what I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, because I even try to tailor my lessons to the demographic of the class, so they can see themselves. I realize if they see themselves in my lecture, they're more apt to pay attention, to be more engaged.
Absolutely.
So, and that takes a lot of preparation.
You kind of have to be a chameleon to a certain extent.
Yes.
Because, so some of my lectures, it gets pretty, interesting.
It does.
Because I can go from being the astute, professor to, I grew up in the hood too, and I know how the hood is.
Right.
And so I can do that.
Right.
And I can do other personalities, if you will. Because I've lived a variety of ways in my life. I lived in different cultures. I lived in different communities. And so I've understood these different communities.
Yeah.
And to understand and try to get people to understand that I'm not discounting any culture, discounting any race, religion, or anything like that. What I'm trying to do is meet you where you are.
Right.
That I understand.
Got you. Got you, John. John, what would you tell your younger self?
Man, they say hindsight is 20/20, huh? Well, I would tell my younger self that play the long game.
Okay.
Sometimes we play the short game too much. Meaning, like, for example, all I had to do was 1 extra year and I could have had my law degree. And not that I wanted to be a lawyer per se. Okay. But it would have been more beneficial than harmful. And it wouldn't have cost me that much more to stay in another year of school. But I was playing the short game. I was playing I need to get a job. I need to do this. I need to do this now. And instead of looking to the future, I was looking at what was going on today. And so I got into real estate, and I tell people this all the time. Real estate is not a short game career. Right. It's a long game career. Yeah. You're in it if you get in it, you're only there for 3 or 4, 5, 6 years. You're never going to make enough money to say, oh, I was in real estate. Right. That's not going to do you. People who are doing well in real estate have been there for decades. Yes. It's a long game. And it's how you model that professionalism over time. So I think I would tell my young self is look to the future, plan for the present, but look to the future. Okay. Right? You have a friend who's one of the top real estate agents in McLennan County, and he talked to me. His name is Daniel. He says, I make money with real estate, but I'm in the relationship building. And we're going back to building relationships. He said, I build relationships. I'm more keen on making sure I build these good, strong relationships so people can come back to me, they refer me. So he's been in real estate game for decades. So of course he's successful, but that's what he looks at. I build good relationships. All right, John, last question. So what's your life's purpose? Help people. I truly believe that I was put here to be a conduit to people doing better for themselves. Oh, wow. It's awesome. Yeah. But I mean, it keeps going back to that. It does. For me, I mean, I do things like, dang, this is what I'm doing. I'm helping people. At the end of the day, that's what it really boils down to. Okay. All right, would you like to leave our listening audience with any words of advice or any tidbits? Yeah, I used to tell my employees this all the time, that as a leader, and no matter what you do, because even in the classroom we're leaders, because they don't work for us, but they're there because of us, right? And we have control of their minds, so to speak. But they have an expectation of me. They need to explain what that is. And so as a leader, I work for you as much as you work for me.
Okay.
You know, I'm working for you as a student. That I want you to be as good as you can be, but it's a two-way street. I need you to participate. I need you to work with me. Tell me what you want. I may not be able to do exactly what you want. Some students say, well, I want you to do it this way. Well, you know, I can't necessarily do that. But we got to have that open level of dialogue for me to try to help you out as best I can. Because I do believe in all aspects, I'm working for you as much as you are here to help me have a job,
Gotcha.
so to speak.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
No
I
problem.
love talking to
appreciate
you.
it.
And it's interesting because every time, like, when I was, and John knows this, am I the only one to do that? Like, I think other people do you like this too. And sometimes we have some rough time in our classroom. We'll see John in the hallway, and John's that kind of that soundboard that we need. And he was just
I've had that a couple of times.
I know,
maybe a
like
few
John's
times.
like our soundboard. And he's new, like you like new to the department, but like, oh yes, I saw John. This is what's going on, like, and he was just calm you down. He like that calm me. Okay, Felicia, this is this. Okay, try this. So just thank you for being that to our department.
I appreciate
We look
that.
forward to working with you. A pleasant way, a pleasant person to have in our department in behavioral sciences. Thank you guys once again for this interview and this opportunity to listen to us just kind of chat and
Thank you.
conversate. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Edgar. I want to thank Connor. I want to thank Paula Unger for all the people that work in the background for us. Thank you for another episode. See you next time.